It is a huge honor for me today to introduce our speaker. And this is not him, but you're probably looking at this thing going, what is this piece of junk on the stage? And what this is actually, this was on the side of the road. Somebody threw it away. We don't know who. And Jonathan Palmer, who's the executive pastor at our church, a couple years ago, during the pre-launch phase of our church, took this bike, got it off the side of the road, cleaned it up, and rode it around for a whole summer as really, honestly, a sacrifice because he, at that time, couldn't afford gas for a car. And I want you to know who's speaking to you today because this is a guy who I've gotten to know really well. And I heard one person define success as the people that know you the best respect you the most. And I've gotten to know this guy really well, and the more I've gotten to know him, the more I've grown to love him and respect him. And he does a lot of things behind the scenes. He's made sacrifices. He had no idea I was going to bring this bike up here. By the way, if anybody wants it, you can have it after service. But he's made sacrifices. He's never once put himself first on this team. He's a guy that he's never asked me to speak publicly, although he's very talented and has the ability. He's a guy, if I can use a sports analogy, he has the ability to shoot, but he's chosen to play defense because he believes in the vision of this church and he loves you guys. He loves this church. And so I want you to know the person that's going to be sharing with you today is one of the best men that I've ever worked with, that I've ever known. He's become a very close friend and somebody I respect highly and have had a chance to learn from and work with. One church. Would you put your hands together and welcome to the stage Pastor Jonathan Palmer.
Just so glad to have this opportunity. I do want to take a minute. I don't know if we've ever done this, but I want to just say hey to all of the people that Greg mentioned that listen to or watch our podcasts. And I looked it up last month alone. We had 296 viewers or watchers on our podcast, so almost 300 people who aren't here on a Sunday that take part of listen to our messages or watch our messages. And of those 296, they were from 38 different states and 8 different countries. So, I mean, we have people all around the world that are listening and watching and being a part of what we're doing here on Sundays. So I thought that was pretty cool. So, hey, glad you're here, even though you're not with us. Glad you're watching on your computer. And a huge shout out to our production team, led by Dustin Poole, who is playing guitar right here, that makes all the media and all the podcasts happen. Well, we've been in a series called New. It's been, to be honest, just an incredible, incredible series. And if you've been here from the start of January, you know you've been challenged, you've been encouraged, you've been inspired by these messages that Pastor Greg has been sharing week in and week out. And this is the 7th of 8 messages in this new series. And so if you haven't been here, maybe you're new with us today or you've just come over the last few weeks, let me kind of catch you up to speed. We started at the very beginning of January in this series New, and we talked about having a new attitude. Every message came from the book of Nehemiah, looking at the story of Nehemiah. And so we talked about having a new attitude to start out 2013. What do we need to do to check our attitude to make sure we're in the right frame of mind? Then we talked about the second week, new relationships. If you were here, Greg and I were both up here together, and we talked about providential relationships, and we introduced connect groups to you, which has been an incredible, incredible start to the new year with the connect groups. Then we hit on new vision. We talked about how God gives us a vision. God gave Nehemiah a vision for his life, something bigger than himself, something that he wanted to accomplish, that God wanted him to accomplish. Then a few weeks ago, we talked about a new passion, and Greg talked about the importance and shared some of his personal passions with us in a very passionate message, appropriately enough. And then we talked about 2 weeks ago a new plan. It's not just enough to have a passion. We've got to have a plan. We've got to have a plan to execute what God has called us to do. And then finally, last week, Greg talked about a new focus. And we looked at the story of Nehemiah and how there were some people on the outside, some enemies, some people that were against him that were causing conflict as they were trying to rebuild the walls, which we'll look at in just a moment. And today we're going to take a look at how Nehemiah responded to internal conflict. We're going to look at how Nehemiah responded to internal conflict. I came across a few comical scenarios that I'm going to read to you that I know without a shadow of a doubt ended up with some serious internal conflict. So listen here. A man bought a cemetery plot for his mother-in-law for Christmas. The next year, he didn't buy her anything. When she asked him why he didn't get her a gift, he said, "You still haven't used the gift I bought you last year." And that's how the fight got started. A woman walked into the room and asked her husband, "What's on TV?" The husband simply replied, "Dust." And that's how the fight got started. A husband asked, "Where do you want to go for our anniversary?" The wife replied, "I want to go somewhere I haven't been in a long time." So the husband suggested, "How about the kitchen?" And that's how the fight got started. My favorite. A wife was hinting about what she wanted for her anniversary. "I want something shiny that goes from 0 to 200 in about 3 seconds. So the husband bought her a scale. And that's how the fight got started. Let that one marinate. I'm glad you guys laughed, because imagine if I read those as my opener and no one laughed. So I'm really glad you guys thought those were as funny as I did. We all deal with internal conflict, no doubt. It's just, it doesn't matter. We are going to deal with conflict from people that are closest to us. And internal conflict really can be, I won't say the most, but it can definitely at times be the most dangerous, or cause the most hurt, or cause the most pain, because internal conflict comes from people who are closest to us. And we're not always expecting that. Not always expecting people who are close to us to cause conflict, to cause hurt, to cause pain. Internal conflict, we'll look at a couple different ways, but mostly this morning we're going to look at how internal conflict is caused from people around us. And these could be, think about in your life. Maybe you're here, you own a business, and you have a business partner. Think about how much, access they have to your life and to the business. Imagine the damage that they could cause if they chose to do so, whether accidentally or intentionally. There is some serious conflict that can come from people that we let really close to us. Think about our families. We think when we have ADT security and we lock our doors that when we go to bed at night, we're totally safe. And we are mostly from the outside, but what happens if someone on the inside of the family wants to do damage? Maybe not physically, but emotionally or relationally. Think about your families and how people that are close to you, your spouse or your kids, can really cause internal conflict in the family to you. Coworkers, you work with people 8 hours a day, 40 hours a week. You're really allowing people to become very close to you, and that could cause some conflict, that could cause some hurt, that could cause some pain, could cause some strife. Church is a place where some people on the outside, if they don't like what we're doing, if they don't like one church, if they don't like the church, they may decide to hold up signs or do things that would maybe stifle what a church is trying to do. But think about how much more damage someone inside of a church could do. Through gossiping, through negative attitude, through trying to take the church off course. God's given us a vision to ignite a movement to reach a disconnected culture. Many of you have heard that many times. But if people inside the church aren't wanting to go that direction and they're trying to do other things, that could really damage the growth and the health of this church. Your neighbors. My brother-in-law and sister are moving for a year for a job, and so they're leaving their house in Memphis. They're giving their neighbors keys to their house to check in on it. They built a relationship with these guys. They trust them. But what happens if the neighbors decide one day they don't really care and they want to mess up the house or do something? They could do that. Internal conflict often comes most from the people who are closest to us. In college, my junior year, I had a brand new MacBook stolen right out of my room when I was eating dinner in the cafeteria. And I found out later it was from one of the guys on my floor who ended up actually getting kicked out of the school for that same reason. But our school had tons of security. You had to have your ID card to even get in the building. We were in downtown Minneapolis, but there's really no way to control what happens with someone who lives with you, lives on your floor, that can come into your room whenever they want. And so today we're going to look at internal conflict. I will just mention, we're not going to really discuss this very much today, but internal conflict can also happen inside of our own minds. So it's not just with people around us, but there is that internal conflict that we deal with all the time. If you can picture kind of the cartoon person with, a devil on, in one ear and an angel in the other one, saying, don't do this or go there or don't go there or take this or don't take that. I deal with it every time I go to the refrigerator. When I go, my wife loves to buy tons of fruit, and so I just see this fruit every time I open the door, but every time I see that, I also see the baked goods that she likes to make, the cookies. So I've got this internal battle in my mind of, do I want a cookie or do I want an apple? And I don't usually take the apple, but I know I should. There's that internal conflict inside of our heads. But no matter what kind of internal conflict that we deal with, whether it's in our heads or with people around us, one thing is true, and that is that we need to respond to internal conflict. And that's what I want to look at today. So we're going to look at a part of Nehemiah's story in just a moment, how we can learn, what we can learn from Nehemiah as to just how critical our response to internal conflict is. In fact, our response to internal conflict can make us or break us. Our response to internal conflict will make us or break us. What conflict was Nehemiah facing? Let me just recap in case you are new with us today, which is awesome, or if you've missed at all. Nehemiah was a cupbearer. He's an Old Testament character in the Bible. He wrote the book of Nehemiah. It was actually his personal memoirs. It was his journal. And he was a cupbearer thousands of years ago to King Artaxerxes. And a cupbearer was basically someone that just tested the drink, the wine or the drink of whatever the king was going to drink, just to make sure there was no poison. So basically he was putting his life on the line every single time the king wanted something to drink. God gave Nehemiah a vision and a passion to rebuild the walls of Jerusalem. And so the walls of Jerusalem had been torn down. You can hear a lot more about this story. I'm not going to preach all previous 6 messages, but the walls have been torn down. And the king blessed this vision and wanted Nehemiah to lead a team and to go and to completely rebuild the walls of Jerusalem that had been torn down. And last week, if you were here, you remember some guys by the name of Sanballat and Tobiah and others who were fighting against Nehemiah, did not want to see the walls be built. And so they were fighting against him, and so Nehemiah responded to that. But today we're looking specifically at the internal conflict that Nehemiah responded to. You can turn with me in your Bibles to Nehemiah chapter 5. Nehemiah chapter 5. If you don't have a Bible, it'll be on the screen. If you don't own a Bible, period, we'd love to give you one. You can stop by our Connection Center after service. Nehemiah 5, starting in verse 1. About this time, some of the men and their wives raised a cry of protest against their fellow Jews. They were saying, "We have such large families, we need more food to survive." Verse 3. Others said, "We have mortgaged our fields, vineyards, and homes to get food during the famine." And others said, "We have had to borrow money on our fields and vineyards to pay our taxes. We belong to the same family as those who are wealthy, and our children are just like theirs. We must sell our children into slavery just to get enough money to live. We have already sold some of our daughters, and we are helpless to do anything about it, for our fields and vineyards are already mortgaged to others." Some of Nehemiah's team that was helping him rebuild the walls began to protest, began to complain, is what we'll read in just a moment. The project, they weren't complaining for no reason. This project was taxing and was really putting a strain on their finances. You see, people that were helping them rebuild the walls, they were farmers, they owned businesses, and so they were spending so much time rebuilding these walls that they were having to spend less time making money, and so finances became an issue. And this is a classic case of internal conflict, because internal conflict can both be distracting and it can cause division. It can cause distraction, it can cause division. And so when people begin to complain on a team, you know how it goes. Eventually, we see it in sports a lot on teams. They'll start to complain, and before you know it, the team begins to kind of divide. There's kind of one group versus the other. They can be distracted from their ultimate goal. And Nehemiah was not going to let this team become distracted or be divided. And so immediately, Nehemiah responded to this conflict. And we're going to look at three ways or three things that we can learn from Nehemiah as to how he responded to this internal conflict. So if you're taking notes today, and if you are, you can write down number one: respond to internal conflict right away, not someday. Respond to internal conflict right away, not someday. We notice in verse 6, it'll be on the screen, when I heard their complaints, this is Nehemiah, when I heard their complaints, I was very angry. After thinking it over, I spoke out against these nobles and officials. I told them, you are hurting your own relatives by charging interest when they borrow money. Then I called a public meeting to deal with the problem. One of the most unhealthy things that we can do when it comes to internal conflict is to avoid it. Now, obviously, as Greg so eloquently put it a few weeks ago, no one truly loves conflict. Like, they're just out looking for conflict. And if you are, you're probably a jerk. And so, but no one, I mean, some people handle it better than others, but no one truly loves conflict. But one of the worst things that we can do is totally avoid it. Rewind to Thursday, Valentine's Day. I had a great day with my wife, Heather. We both, she's a teacher in Gehenna, and so we were working during the day. And so we had breakfast in the morning after our workout, and it was a nice time. We left each other for the day, came back, went on a nice date, and it was great. But on our way home from dinner, Heather said something to me. She said, and I won't say specifically what it was, but she said that I had done something that evening that had caused her to feel sad. I had upset her. I had frustrated her. And we talked about it, and by the next morning, everything was great. We had resolved it, and I had apologized. She understood where I came from, and I was definitely understanding where she came from. But imagine if Heather would have not responded to that internal conflict, that conflict coming from her spouse. She may have held on to that for a while until the next time that I did something similar to that, or the next time that I upset her or frustrated her. It could have come out in a very unhealthy way. And so whether it's intentional or accidental, no matter what, when we cause conflict, or if someone causes conflict to us, that's someone on the inside, someone close to us, the best thing that we can do is respond to it right away. Notice the process that Nehemiah used for responding to internal conflict. Go ahead and bring that up. When I heard the complaints, I was very angry. After thinking it over, I spoke out against these nobles and officials. What if we took away after when I heard the complaints, I was very angry, period. If Heather would have been saddened by what I said or what I did and then just felt sad, that's not good. If Nehemiah would have just stayed angry and then continued, that's not good. But also, look here, when I heard the complaints, I was very angry. What if we take out the next part? And I spoke out against these nobles and officials. So we take out the think it over part, because that's very critical too. Because no matter what, we want to do things right away. We want to respond to conflict right away, but we also want to respond to conflict the right way. We want to handle it right away, but we also want to handle it the right way. Now, if you learned the character of Nehemiah as much as I have, this isn't said in the Bible, and so I'm not going to guarantee this, but I have a strong feeling that Nehemiah did not take a week-long or a month-long or a year-long time to think this over. This dude was on a mission. He wanted to get these walls rebuilt. We've seen him brush off conflict and people that were trying to distract him before. So I doubt that he took a long time to think it over, but I do think maybe it was a moment, maybe it was an afternoon, maybe it was an hour or 10 minutes. And so when I say the right away versus someday, we all know what someday means. Someday really means never. You know, someday I'm going to get a gym membership. Someday I'm going to do my taxes. Someday, I'm going to clean out the gutters, whatever it might be. That usually means it's going to be a long time, if ever. But right away means prompt. It means soon. The sooner we can respond to the internal conflict, the better. Let me just kind of illustrate this with something that I found this week that was kind of blew my mind. In 2010, there were 16,259 homicides in the United States. So external people, that many people died from somebody on the outside, someone that did something to them, whether they shot them or hit them with a car, whatever it might have been, they killed them. That same year, 574,743 people died from cancer. That's like more than 35 times the amount. And what is cancer? Cancer is internal. Cancer comes from the inside. But here what was even crazier. There's a 90% chance of survival if the cancer is caught in stages 1 or 2. 90%. Now these are averages, and this is one guy's study. But when the cancer isn't caught or detected until stages 3 or 4, there's only a 10% chance of survival. Early detection is huge, not only in cancer, but in conflict. The quicker that we can respond to internal conflict, someone that is close to us, someone on our team, someone in our organization, the better off we will be. Greg is a great example of responding to conflict. I feel like we have a whole team that doesn't really like conflict, but Greg has learned the importance of it more than the rest of us, and I hope we can get there. But when Greg comes to me and tells me there's something wrong, I know he's going to respond to that quickly. He does not like to let things go for a long time. So we think about it, we process our thoughts, but the sooner the better for responding and dealing with internal conflict. What is the internal conflict that you need to respond to right away? Not only do we need to respond to conflict right away, but we need to respond to internal conflict with vision, not venom. We need to respond to internal conflict with vision, not venom. Look at chapter 5, verse 8 in Nehemiah. At the meeting, I said to them, so this is the meeting that he called after he talked to the nobles and the officials. At the meeting, I said to them, we are doing all we can to redeem our Jewish relatives who have had to sell themselves to pagan foreigners. But you are selling them back into slavery again. How often must we redeem them? And they had nothing to say in their defense. It can be so easy to respond to conflict harshly, especially when it's someone close to us. Usually when someone close to us hurts us or causes some sort of conflict, it stings a little bit, that initial moment. Have you ever been playing a sport or doing a physical activity and you get hit or hurt, and your first reaction is just to get really mad? You just want to yell, even though you know it was an accident or you know it wasn't their fault. You just immediately just want to just yell at them. Proverbs 15:1 says, a gentle answer deflects anger, but harsh words makes tempers flare. There's no good that can come out of responding to conflict with venom, but it's much more effective to respond with vision. Vision will last longer. Vision will help them understand why they're doing what they're doing. Nehemiah had to help the people who were complaining to build these rebuilding these walls. He had to help them understand the big picture. And let me give you an example. Check out this video on the screen.
I am William Wallace, and I see a whole army of my countrymen here in defiance of tyranny. You've come to fight as free men, and free men you are. What will you do without freedom? Will you fight?
Fight against that? No! We will run, and we will live.
Aye. Fight and you may die. Run and you'll live. At least a while. And dying in your beds many years from now, would you be willing to trade all the days from this day to that for one chance, just one chance, to come back here and tell our enemies that they may take our lives, but they'll never take our freedom!
You notice the transformation that took place right there in just that short clip. First of all, that's a great movie. I want to watch it today, actually. I may do that during second service, so someone else may need to preach. I really want to watch that. But secondly, do you notice they initially were scared to fight? They didn't want to fight. They just wanted to go and hide. They wanted to save their life. But what William Wallace so quickly and effectively was able to help them understand by responding to their negativity, which is conflict. He responded with vision instead of venom, and all of a sudden began to help them see the big picture, help them to understand, listen, this isn't, you could go and save your life probably for a while, but ultimately you'll have no freedom. And think about the rest, think about your children and your children's children and their children. They were fighting more for not just for their lives, they were fighting for the entire freedom of the nation of Scotland. And these soldiers were thinking about their life, but it was so much more. And the same thing happened in the story of Nehemiah. Nehemiah had to help these people understand, listen, we're rebuilding these walls. It's not just about the wall, and it's not just about us. It's about our heritage. It's about our family. It's about our relatives who have gone through so much. We're rebuilding the walls for them. And who can argue with God-given vision? When God gave Nehemiah vision, you notice they said they had nothing to say in their defense. There's nothing you can say when you cast vision in response to conflict that God's given to us. No one said anything to William Wallace. They just all raised their swords and yelled really loud. They bought into that vision. They understood the importance that it was bigger than just themselves. He could have used venom. He could have yelled at them and said, listen, this is not about you. It's not about you. You got to quit complaining. Nehemiah could have said, listen, quit complaining and just get back to work. And that would have probably helped for a short time. They may have, okay, fine, we'll do it. But it wouldn't have been long before they would have been right back at it, complaining, causing that internal conflict. President Franklin D. Roosevelt led our nation through one of the most difficult and trying times in the history of the United States in the Great Depression. And he was known for, he's remembered for using vision to help people get through that. Remember the phrase, the only thing we have to fear is fear itself? He was helping them see a picture. The song that he used for his campaign, his theme song was Happy Days Are Here Again. Never even heard the song, but the title is enough for me. He was helping them understand, listen, the best days are ahead of us. He could have said, yeah, you know what, it's just terrible. Hopefully we can get through this. So he was saying, happy days are ahead. The only thing we have to fear is fear itself. When leaders respond to internal conflict with vision and not venom, it trickles down to everyone that's following them. And as leaders in our community, as leaders in your business, in your organization, as you lead your nonprofit, as you lead your family, as you lead maybe your neighborhood, as you lead your connect group, understand that responding to internal conflict with vision is much more effective and a much healthier way to respond to internal conflict than venom. Lastly, we need to respond to internal conflict with selflessness, not selfishness. We need to respond with selflessness, not selfishness. It looks a lot alike, but it's a lot different. Have you ever noticed that when conflict happens, what's our natural tendency as humans? To go selfish. When finances become, our personal finances become tight, something happens, we clinch onto our money so much more. We become less generous. When someone accuses us of doing something, we get defensive, right? When someone tells us, when Heather and I were first dating, I did it all the time. I still do it sometimes, but I'm getting better, I hope. But she would say something to me that maybe I had done, and immediately I would say, yeah, but you do that too. Or remember when you did that to me? I would immediately go on the defense instead of hearing her out. Verse 14 and 15 says, for the entire 12 years I was governor of Judah from the 20th year to the 32nd year of the reign of King Artaxerxes. Neither I nor my officials drew on our official food allowance, The former governors, in contrast, had laid heavy burdens on the people, demanding a daily ration of food and wine besides silver. Even their assistants took advantage of the people, but because I feared God, I did not act that way. In a couple of verses down, it says that he asked for nothing. Nehemiah was so much more concerned when internal conflict happened. He was so much more concerned with other people than he was with himself. This response is not natural. Trust me, there's nothing natural that Nehemiah reacted to. He had to make the intentional decision, and you and I need to make the intentional decision that when there's internal conflict, we will respond selflessly and not selfishly. When internal conflict happens in our workplace, in our families, in our organizations, in our business, in our connect group, we have to begin to look at the needs of the other people. We have to try to understand where they're coming from instead of going selfish. Nehemiah went in the opposite way of what our human nature wants us to do. Talk about a guy who is totally selfless, choosing to take no food allowance because understanding there was already a financial burden on the people in the community, people rebuilding the wall. And one main reason that Nehemiah was able to do this, and I close with this, was because Nehemiah desired the blessing of God more than he did the rewards of man. And we can see this very clearly in the last verse of this chapter, verse 19. Remember, O my God, all that I have done for these people, and bless me for it. These were his personal memoirs. Chances are no one else even knew that he wasn't taking his food allowance like the other governors were. Chances are people didn't realize the sacrifices that he was making. When other people were struggling financially, he was making those sacrifices in his response to internal conflict. And although you and I maybe are in different places, we're going through different conflicts in our lives, it's a different day and age, the truths that we can learn from Nehemiah are still the same today. And my prayer is that you and I, when internal conflict happens, that we would respond selflessly, we would respond with vision, not venom, and that we would respond right away and the right way.